March 1945. The Rhine River flows through the heart of Europe as it has for millennia, its dark waters carrying the weight of 2,000 years of military history. Roman legions halted at its banks. Medieval armies fought for control of its crossings. Napoleon's forces struggled against its currents. Now, in the dying weeks of the Third Reich, German commanders placed their final hopes in this ancient barrier. The river runs wide here, between 200 and 400 meters across depending on the sector. The current moves swiftly, fed by alpine snowmelt and spring rains. The water temperature hovers near freezing. Engineers estimate that any conventional river crossing would require extensive preparation. Pontoon bridges assembled under fire, assault boats paddled against the current, engineers working under machine gun fire to secure beachheads. German planners calculate that such operations would take days and cost the Allies thousands of casualties. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, newly appointed Commander-in-Chief West, studies maps at his headquarters. The Western Front has collapsed. The Wehrmacht's once formidable defensive positions in France and the Low Countries have been overrun. Army Group B is surrounded in the Ruhr. Army Group H holds a fragmenting line along the Rhine's western approaches. But Kesselring sees possibility in geography. The river itself might accomplish what his depleted divisions cannot: halt the Allied advance long enough for what? Negotiation? Miraculous intervention? The Field Marshal does not articulate these questions, but they hang unspoken in every planning session. German intelligence assessments paint a consistent picture. Allied forces massing along the Rhine's western bank possess overwhelming firepower, complete air superiority, and inexhaustible supplies. But they lack one critical element: the means to cross a major river under fire without extensive preparation. Reconnaissance reports note concentrations of engineering equipment, pontoon bridge sections, and assault boats. This confirms German expectations. The Allies will attempt conventional river crossings, operations that German artillery and defensive positions can contest effectively. Along the Rhine's eastern bank, Wehrmacht units dig in. Artillery pieces are positioned to cover likely crossing sites. Infantry strongpoints are fortified with interlocking fields of fire. Mines are laid along potential landing zones. The preparations are thorough despite the chronic shortages of ammunition, fuel, and experienced personnel. Officers brief their troops with cautious optimism. The river buys time. Every day the Allies spend preparing their crossing is another day for Germany. The atmosphere among German defenders combines exhaustion with grim determination. These are not the confident soldiers of 1940 or even 1943. They are a mixture of veterans who have survived years of combat and hastily trained replacements who have known nothing but retreat. Many understand that the war is lost. But the Rhine offers something that has been absent for months: a defensible position, a clear military objective, a reason to believe that resistance might matter. In command bunkers, officers pore over intelligence summaries. Allied activity along the Rhine increases daily. Artillery units move into position. Infantry divisions rotate forward. Supply dumps expand behind the Allied lines. All of this activity appears consistent with preparations for conventional assault crossings. German intelligence officers note the patterns with professional satisfaction. The Allies are following predictable doctrine. This means German countermeasures can be calibrated accordingly. What the intelligence summaries do not mention, what German reconnaissance has failed to detect, is the nature of certain vehicles being moved forward under cover of darkness. Convoys traveling only at night, their cargoes covered by tarps, their routes planned to avoid aerial observation. Hundreds of trucks, but not ordinary trucks. Vehicles that represent a capability German planners have not anticipated and cannot counter with conventional river defense tactics. The Rhine flows on, indifferent to the preparations unfolding along its banks. Its waters have witnessed countless battles, countless armies attempting to force passage. German soldiers manning defensive positions take some comfort from this history. The river has always demanded a price from those who would cross it. In March 1945, German commanders believe that price will be high enough to matter. They are wrong. The nature of river warfare is about to change in ways that 2 millennia of military history have not prepared them to anticipate. The failure begins not with a single oversight but with accumulated assumptions, each seemingly reasonable, together forming a comprehensive misunderstanding of what the Allies have prepared. German military intelligence in early 1945 operates under severe constraints. The Luftwaffe, once capable of extensive reconnaissance, has been reduced to sporadic flights that risk annihilation by Allied fighters. Agent networks in Allied-held territory have been rolled up or rendered ineffective. Signal intelligence provides some information, but Allied communication security has improved dramatically since 1944. German intelligence officers must work with incomplete data, filling gaps with assumptions derived from doctrine and experience. One such assumption concerns amphibious vehicles. German intelligence is aware that the Allies possess specialized equipment for beach landings. Reports from Normandy mention strange wheeled vehicles capable of operating in water. But the assessments categorize these as purpose-built beach assault craft, slow and ungainly, suitable only for short distances in calm waters. The Rhine, with its swift current and potential for sustained defensive fire, seems an entirely different tactical environment. A second assumption involves Allied logistics and doctrine. German officers, trained in a military tradition emphasizing detailed planning and rigid adherence to established procedures, project these characteristics onto their opponents. They expect the Allies to follow methodical, textbook approaches to river crossing operations. This expectation is reinforced by observed Allied behavior in previous campaigns. The Rhine crossing at Remagen, achieved through the fortuitous capture of an intact bridge, appears to German planners as an exception rather than an indicator of Allied operational flexibility. The third, most fundamental assumption concerns industrial capability. Germany's economy, even before Allied bombing campaigns devastated production capacity, operated on principles of craftsmanship and specialized engineering. German military equipment is often superb in design but difficult and time-consuming to manufacture. German planners unconsciously assume similar constraints affect Allied production. They understand intellectually that American industrial output is vast, but they fail to grasp the implications. That the Americans can mass-produce specialized military equipment with the same efficiency they apply to consumer goods. These assumptions create a blind spot. German defensive planning for the Rhine focuses on countering conventional crossing methods. Assault boats, pontoon bridges, perhaps some specialized amphibious vehicles in limited numbers. Artillery fire plans are designed to interdict boat crossings and destroy bridges during construction. Infantry positions are sited to engage forces landing from small craft. Reserves are positioned to counterattack beachheads before they can be consolidated. At Wehrmacht headquarters along the Rhine, officers execute their duties with professional competence. Artillery observers calibrate their fire plans. Infantry commanders inspect defensive positions. Engineers supervise the final demolition preparations for bridges not yet destroyed. All of this effort proceeds from accurate tactical understanding applied to incorrect strategic assumptions. A general major commanding a division sector north of Wesel reviews his defensive scheme with staff officers. The map shows likely Allied crossing points marked in red. Blue symbols indicate German defensive positions. Yellow shading represents artillery coverage zones. The briefing proceeds methodically. Enemy assault boats will be engaged while crossing. Artillery will target any attempt to construct pontoon bridges. Reserves will counterattack any successful lodgment. The plan is sound, professional, the product of experienced military minds applying proven doctrine. What the map does not show, what the briefing does not address, is the possibility that the Allies might cross the Rhine not in vulnerable boats or on bridges constructed under fire, but in vehicles that drive into the water on one bank and drive out on the other, carrying men and equipment in continuous shuttle runs that render conventional river defense tactics obsolete. German soldiers in forward positions maintain their vigil. They watch the western bank through binoculars, noting Allied activity, reporting movements. They see troops massing, artillery being positioned, supplies accumulating. They see what they expect to see, an enemy preparing for a conventional assault crossing. They do not see because they are not looking for it, evidence of a capability that will make their carefully prepared defenses irrelevant. In this failure of imagination lies the seeds of tactical surprise. The Wehrmacht's intelligence apparatus, its planning staffs, its experienced commanders, all functioning competently within their understanding of warfare, have created a collective blind spot. They have prepared to fight the battle they expect rather than the battle the Allies are prepared to deliver. The Rhine flows on, carrying secrets in the darkness. Soon it will carry something else. American soldiers and vehicles the Germans do not expect, crossing at speeds German fire plans cannot accommodate, in numbers that will overwhelm defensive positions designed to contest a different kind of battle entirely. The story begins not on a battlefield but in a design office, with engineers solving a problem that initially has nothing to do with crossing European rivers under fire. The United States military faces a logistics challenge in amphibious operations. Landing craft can bring men and supplies to beaches, but transferring cargo from ship to shore requires multiple handling stages. Supplies must be loaded into landing craft, brought to the beach, unloaded again, then moved inland by trucks that cannot operate in water. Each transfer point creates delay, vulnerability, and inefficiency. The military needs something different. A vehicle that can load supplies from ships offshore, drive through surf and across beaches, and then continue inland on roads. The War Department approaches several manufacturers with this requirement. General Motors, specifically its engineers working with the DUKW designation, D for 1942 model year, U for utility, K for all-wheel drive, W for dual rear axles, begins adapting the standard GMC CCKW 6x6 truck. The challenge is formidable. The vehicle must be seaworthy enough to navigate ocean swells and surf. It must carry significant cargo, at least 2 tons, preferably more. It must transition seamlessly from water to land. And it must retain enough truck-like characteristics to be useful for overland transport. The engineering solutions are ingenious in their practicality. The truck's chassis is modified with a watertight hull welded around it, creating a boat-like body that can displace enough water to float while loaded. A propeller is mounted at the rear, driven by a power takeoff from the truck's engine. The transmission is modified to provide marine drive settings. A bilge pump handles water that inevitably seeps or splashes into the hull. The tire pressure system is made adjustable from inside the cab, allowing the driver to deflate tires for beach sand and reinflate them for road travel. The resulting vehicle looks ungainly. It resembles a boat designed by someone who primarily understood trucks, or perhaps a truck that has swallowed a boat. The hull is tall and flat-sided. The windshield sits high. The wheels, necessarily large for ground clearance and flotation, give the vehicle an awkward, high-hipped appearance. Fully loaded, it rides low in the water, barely a foot of freeboard separating the cargo bed from the waterline. Initial testing reveals both capabilities and limitations. The DUKW is not fast in water, perhaps 6 miles per hour in calm conditions, less in rough seas or against currents. It handles clumsily compared to dedicated boats. Its cargo capacity, while substantial for a truck, is modest compared to purpose-built landing craft. But it possesses one transformative advantage. It requires no pause, no transfer point, no vulnerable moment of stationary unloading on a beach under fire. It simply drives from ship to shore to inland destination in one continuous movement. The first combat deployment comes in Sicily, July 1943. Dukas prove their worth delivering supplies across beaches where conventional methods would have created catastrophic bottlenecks. The operation validates the concept but reveals room for improvement. The Marines use Dukas in Pacific operations, where the vehicles excel at navigating coral reefs and delivering supplies across atolls. By 1944, production has ramped up significantly. Normandy sees hundreds of Dukas operating, so commonplace in the invasion fleet that they cease to attract special attention. This operational history creates a perception. The DUKW is a beach vehicle, a logistics truck for amphibious landings. Its role is important but specific. Nobody, not even most Allied planners, conceives of it as an assault weapon for crossing major European rivers. The transformation of perception begins with the Rhine itself. As Allied armies approach Germany's final natural barrier, planners confront the operational problem. How to get enough men and equipment across fast enough to establish a viable beachhead before German counterattacks can compress and eliminate it. Conventional methods work but slowly. Assault boats carry infantry in small numbers. Pontoon bridges take hours to construct and are vulnerable to artillery fire. What if some planner suggests we use dukus? The suggestion triggers detailed analysis. The Rhine is not a beach landing. The current is stronger than ocean surf in most conditions. The crossing distances are greater than typical ship-to-shore runs. But the duku's capabilities align with the requirements. It can carry a full squad of infantry or a light artillery piece. It can make multiple trips, establishing a ferry service that begins immediately upon the operation's commencement. It is more maneuverable than assault boats, capable of adjusting course while crossing. Its truck mobility means that once across, it can move troops and supplies inland without requiring transfer to other vehicles. Engineers conduct tests. Dukus cross rivers similar to the Rhine in current and width. The vehicles perform adequately, though drivers must account for drift and engines must work harder against the current. Load calculations are refined. Tactics are developed for organizing launch sites and controlling traffic flow. Gradually, a plan emerges. Use dukus as the primary assault crossing vehicle for infantry and light equipment, following an initial artillery barrage and preceding the construction of heavier bridges. By February 1945, the concept has become an operational plan. Hundreds of dukus are allocated for the Rhine crossing. Drivers receive specialized training. Maintenance units prepare to support intensive operations. The vehicles are staged in rear areas, moved forward only at night to avoid German reconnaissance. The DUKW, designed to solve a beach logistics problem, has evolved into an assault weapon. This transformation is complete. What remains is to test whether German defenders, expecting boats and bridges, can effectively contest an attack delivered by swimming trucks that bridge the gap between water and land without pause. Winter 1945 settles over Western Europe with cold that seeps into bones and mud that clogs every road. Behind the Allied lines stretching along the Rhine's western bank, a massive military operation unfolds in darkness and deliberate obscurity. The scale of Operation Plunder, the planned Rhine crossing by British and Canadian forces under Montgomery's command, and Operation Undertone in the American sectors demands logistical preparation unlike anything since Normandy. But unlike Normandy, where German intelligence had months to deduce Allied intentions, the Rhine operation requires tactical surprise. German forces know the Allies will cross. They cannot know precisely when, where, or with what methods. The DUKW component of this deception requires particular care. Several hundred of these vehicles must be moved to forward staging areas, maintained, supplied with fuel and spare parts, and positioned for rapid deployment. All of this must occur without alerting German intelligence to the presence of amphibious vehicle concentrations that would signal imminent river crossings. The convoys move only at night. Dukus, painted in standard olive drab, travel in groups of 10 to 15 vehicles, maintaining careful spacing. They avoid main roads where possible, using secondary routes less likely to be observed by any remaining German agents or high-altitude reconnaissance. Each vehicle carries a tarpaulin that covers the distinctive hull shape during daylight halts. Drivers receive orders to park in wooded areas or beneath camouflage netting during daytime hours. Forward assembly areas are chosen for their concealment characteristics. Woods provide overhead cover against aerial observation. Existing farm buildings offer shelter for maintenance work. Each concentration of dukus is dispersed over enough area that aerial photographs, should any be obtained, would show only scattered vehicles rather than obvious amphibious assault formations. The deception extends beyond physical concealment. Allied signals intelligence detects German efforts to monitor radio traffic for clues about crossing preparations. False radio messages reference pontoon bridge units and assault boat battalions, real capabilities that German intelligence expects to observe. Genuine DUKW-related communications are kept to minimum necessary levels and use low-power radios that reduce interception probability. Engineers rehearse the crossing procedures in rear areas, using rivers and lakes that approximate Rhine conditions. The drills focus on launch procedures. How quickly dukas can be moved from staging positions to water entry points, how to organize continuous shuttle runs, how to coordinate traffic to prevent congestion at landing sites. These rehearsals occur away from forward areas, in locations where German intelligence has no possibility of observation. Driver training intensifies. Operating a DUKW in peacetime conditions is straightforward. Operating one at night under fire with a river current pushing laterally requires different skills. Drivers practice night navigation using minimal lights. They learn to judge current drift and compensate with steering adjustments. They drill emergency procedures for dealing with swamped vehicles or mechanical failures while in the water. Maintenance units prepare for intensive operations. DUKW engines, reliable in normal use, will be running continuously during the crossing operations. Bilge pumps must function perfectly. A failed pump means a swamped vehicle. Propellers must be inspected for damage. Tire pressure systems must work reliably so vehicles can adjust for varying terrain. Parts are stockpiled. Spare pumps, drive belts, propeller assemblies, engine components. British and American commanders coordinating the operation maintain careful security around the DUKW component of their plans. Staff officers with knowledge of the vehicle's intended role are limited to those with operational necessity. Briefings to field commanders occur as late as possible before the operation begins. Even units that will directly support DUKW operations receive full information only days before the crossing. German intelligence continues monitoring Allied preparations with the resources available. Aerial reconnaissance, limited by fuel shortages and Allied air superiority, captures images of Allied positions. Photo interpreters note pontoon bridge sections, assault boat concentrations, artillery deployments. These observations confirm German expectations. The Allies are preparing conventional river crossing operations. The presence of standard trucks in forward areas attracts no special attention. The German see vehicles designed to float and fight. They simply fail to recognize them as such. By mid-March, approximately 500 Dukus are positioned in concealed staging areas within 15 kilometers of the Rhine. Fuel trucks stand ready to maintain constant supply. Recovery vehicles are positioned to handle breakdowns. Medical units prepare to evacuate casualties that will inevitably occur during any contested crossing. The entire apparatus of amphibious assault has been assembled and hidden in plain sight. Soldiers assigned to DUKW operations receive final briefings in the days before the crossing. They learn their specific roles, which vehicles they will board, what equipment they will carry, where their landing zones are located. Infantry squad leaders study maps showing their objectives once across the river. Artillery crews review procedures for securing their guns in the DUKW cargo beds. Communications teams check radio equipment that must function during the crossing. The weather remains cold. Rain falls intermittently, turning staging areas to mud. Soldiers wait in the particular limbo that precedes major operations, knowing action is imminent but not precisely when. Some write letters. Others clean weapons repeatedly. A few sleep, having learned, in years of combat, to rest whenever opportunity permits. In German positions across the Rhine, defenders maintain their watch. They observe Allied positions through long-range optics. They note the obvious signs of preparation. They report these observations through intelligence channels. Analysis confirms what commanders already believe. The Allies are preparing to force a crossing using methods that German defensive preparations can contest. The stage is set. Hundreds of ungainly trucks capable of swimming weight in darkness. Thousands of soldiers prepare to board them. German defenders prepare to repel an assault they expect. What none of the defenders anticipate is the speed, the volume, the relentless efficiency of vehicles that will bridge the Rhine not once but dozens of times per hour, establishing in hours what conventional methods would require days to achieve. The Rhine continues its ancient flow, unaware that it is about to witness a transformation in the nature of river warfare. March 23, 1945. Darkness comes early this late winter evening, settling over the Rhine Valley like a physical presence. Temperature drops toward freezing. Mist begins rising from the river's surface, curling in ghostly patterns across the water. On the western bank, Allied positions have gone silent after days of increasing activity. German defenders wait in their positions, alert but uncertain. Something is coming. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. They do not know exactly when. The Allied artillery opens fire at 9 o'clock in the evening. The barrage begins not with a few ranging shots but with immediate, overwhelming intensity. Thousands of guns fire simultaneously. Field artillery, heavy artillery, rocket projectors. The sound is not individual explosions but a continuous roar that makes the ground tremble. The eastern bank of the Rhine disappears behind curtains of smoke and flame. German positions identified through weeks of reconnaissance receive concentrated fire. Communications trenches, command bunkers, observation posts, artillery emplacements, all become targets in a carefully orchestrated fire plan designed to suppress rather than destroy, to force defenders into cover during the critical minutes of the crossing. Behind the artillery positions, in staging areas that have been quiet for hours, activity erupts. DUKW drivers start engines. Infantry squads gather at designated assembly points. Officers shout orders that are barely audible over the artillery thunder. The first wave of vehicles begins moving toward the river on routes marked with dim blue lights visible only from directly behind. The launch sites have been prepared during the preceding days. Approach roads graded and reinforced, river banks cleared of obstacles, traffic control points established. As Dukas arrive, they queue in organized lines. Each vehicle carries its assigned load: 12 infantrymen with combat equipment, or an artillery piece with crew and ammunition, or engineer equipment for establishing the beachhead. Soldiers board quickly, having rehearsed this procedure repeatedly. They take positions in the cargo bed, equipment secured, weapons ready. The first DUKW reaches the water's edge at 9:15 p.m. The driver shifts into marine drive, feels the propeller engage, and slowly drives forward into the Rhine. The vehicle's bow enters the current. Water closes around the hull. The transition from land to water is seamless. One moment the DUKW is a truck on a road. The next it is a boat moving across a river. Soldiers inside grip the sides as the vehicle adjusts to buoyancy. The driver steers toward the eastern bank, compensating for current drift. The Rhine flows south to north here, pushing the DUKW downstream. The driver aims upstream of his intended landing point, allowing the current to carry him to the correct position. Engine noise is steady, not loud enough to carry over artillery fire but audible to the soldiers aboard. The crossing takes approximately 12 minutes at the Duka's maximum water speed. Behind the first vehicle, others follow at 30-second intervals. Within 10 minutes, dozens of Dukas are in the water simultaneously, each following its assigned course, each a small moving fortress carrying soldiers toward the far bank. From above, the pattern would appear almost mechanical. Vehicles entering the water in steady rhythm, dispersing across the river's width, converging on landing zones. German defenders, crouching in bunkers and trenches under the artillery barrage, cannot effectively observe the crossing during its initial minutes. Forward observers, those few whose positions allow vision across the river, report movement but struggle to identify what they are seeing. The mist, the darkness, the artillery smoke, all combine to obscure details. Some reports mention boats. Others describe vehicles. None accurately convey the scale or nature of what is occurring. The first Dukas reach the eastern bank at 9:27 p.m. Drivers feel the hull scrape bottom, adjust throttle, and engage ground drive. The vehicles crawl up the bank. One moment floating, the next moment driving, the transition seamless. Infantry squads leap from cargo beds and move immediately toward their objectives. The Dukas, now empty, turn and drive back into the water for return trips. German fire begins to intensify as the artillery barrage lifts from frontline positions. Machine guns open up from positions that survived the bombardment. Artillery begins ranging shots, attempting to interdict the crossing. But the German fire plans, designed for slow-moving assault boats, cannot effectively engage the Dukas. The vehicles are faster than anticipated. Their courses vary as drivers maneuver to avoid observed fire. Their low profile in the water makes ranging difficult in darkness and mist. A German machine gun position on a small bluff achieves clear fields of fire over one landing zone. The gunner opens up, tracer rounds arcing across the water. 2 Dukas alter course, avoiding the most direct approach. A third takes hits in the hull but remains buoyant. The rounds penetrate above the waterline, causing damage but not catastrophic flooding. The DUKW continues to the bank, discharges its troops, and makes its return crossing. Engineers in follow-up waves will silence the machine gun position within 30 minutes. The ferry service establishes its rhythm. Dukas cross, discharge troops and equipment, return empty, reload, and cross again. Some vehicles make 5 trips in the first hour. The bridgehead on the eastern bank expands as more troops land. Infantry squads push inland, clearing German positions, securing the immediate area. Combat engineers arrive, beginning work on more substantial crossing capabilities, but by then the Dukas have already delivered battalion-strength forces. German commanders receiving reports from the front struggle to comprehend what is happening. The crossing has occurred too quickly. Allied forces are established on the eastern bank in strength before German reserve units can be effectively deployed. Reports describe armored boats or swimming tanks, terminology that fails to capture the reality of mass-produced trucks methodically ferrying an army across the Rhine. A Hauptmann commanding a company-strength position north of the primary crossing site receives fragmentary reports from his forward platoons. Allied forces are ashore in large numbers. Their source is unclear. No assault boats observed in sufficient quantity. No bridges visible. The Hauptmann radios division headquarters requesting clarification and instructions. The response, when it comes, reflects command-level confusion. Hold positions, prepare to counterattack once the enemy crossing method is identified. By midnight, 3 hours after the initial artillery barrage, Allied forces have established a beachhead 3 kilometers wide and 2 kilometers deep. Approximately 4,000 troops have crossed, along with supporting weapons and equipment. The Dukas continue their shuttle runs, now operating with slightly more illumination as combat engineers establish limited lighting at loading and unloading points. The operation proceeds with industrial efficiency. Vehicles serviced and refueled during their brief moments ashore on the western bank, then back into the water for another crossing. The psychological impact on German defenders exceeds the purely military effect. Soldiers who have fought for years, who have survived multiple retreats, who understand intellectually that the war is lost, nonetheless retain some hope that the Rhine might provide respite. The rapid establishment of this beachhead, achieved with a capability they did not anticipate, confirms what many have already concluded. Resistance, while it continues, cannot change the outcome. The Rhine flows on through darkness, its waters now traversed by an endless procession of vehicles that blur the distinction between land and water, between trucks and boats, between what military planners believed possible and what American industry has made routine. Dawn on March 24th reveals a transformation that German commanders struggle to comprehend fully even as they attempt to respond to it. The eastern bank of the Rhine, held at such cost, defended with such conviction, has been breached not at one point but at multiple sectors. Allied forces consolidate positions that should not exist, supplied by vehicles that should not be capable of what they have accomplished. A lieutenant commanding a platoon in the 180th Infantry Division receives orders at first light. Move to the river, assess the situation, counterattack if possible. His platoon, already under strength from months of combat and inadequate replacements, moves forward through terrain cratered by the previous night's artillery bombardment. They reach a position overlooking one of the crossing sites expecting to see Allied assault boats or perhaps the early stages of pontoon bridge construction. Instead, they observe Dukas. The vehicles arrive continuously, driving out of the Rhine onto the eastern bank, disgorging troops and equipment, turning immediately to return. The lieutenant watches through binoculars, attempting to understand what he is seeing. The vehicles are clearly trucks. He can identify tires, cargo beds, drivers' cabs. But they are crossing the Rhine without bridges or boats, simply driving through the water as if the river were a road. He reports this observation to his company commander. The response indicates that similar reports are arriving from multiple positions. Allied amphibious vehicles, previously unknown or dismissed as insignificant, are conducting the crossing operations. The lieutenant's platoon has no capability to interdict this traffic. Their light weapons cannot effectively engage the Dukus from their position. Artillery support is unavailable. The few surviving German artillery units are engaged in desperate attempts to slow the Allied buildup at other locations. The platoon withdraws, not under orders but from tactical necessity. Allied infantry are already moving inland from the landing zones. To remain in position is to risk encirclement. The lieutenant leads his men eastward, away from the river, attempting to reach new defensive positions that may or may not still exist. This pattern repeats across the Rhine front. German units positioned to contest conventional crossings find themselves outflanked and overmatched by the speed and volume of Allied deployments. Defensive positions designed to cover boat landing areas or bridge construction sites have become irrelevant. By mid-morning, the Allied bridgehead in some sectors extends 5 kilometers inland. By afternoon, armored vehicles begin crossing on rapidly constructed pontoon bridges. But by then the Dukus have already delivered the infantry and light artillery that secured the bridgehead. At Army Group H headquarters, General Johannes Blaskowitz reviews situation reports with his staff. The maps show Allied penetrations marked in red. The scale of the breaches is unprecedented. Previous Rhine crossings, the American seizure of the Remagen Bridge, the Third Army's crossing at Oppenheim were contained, at least initially. This operation is different. Multiple crossing points, rapid exploitation, overwhelming Allied combat power flowing across the river faster than German reserves can be repositioned to contain it. Blaskowitz recognizes what is occurring. The Rhine line is collapsing not in days or weeks but in hours. The river's defensive value has been negated by Allied capabilities his intelligence services failed to identify. He issues orders for a fighting withdrawal, attempting to establish new defensive positions further east. But the orders reach units already engaged, already falling back, already disintegrating under pressure they cannot effectively resist. The psychological dimension of the collapse compounds the military reality. German soldiers have needed to believe, that the Rhine represented a line that could be held. The rapid Allied crossing destroys that belief. If the Rhine can be crossed this easily, what barrier remains? What defensive position justifies continued sacrifice? Some units continue fighting with professional competence. Others dissolve, soldiers abandoning positions to seek safety in retreat or surrender. Command and control fragments. Communication lines, never robust, fail under the strain of rapid repositioning. Wehrmacht units designed for mobile warfare, now reduced to static defense with inadequate equipment and depleted personnel, cannot conduct the kind of coordinated withdrawal that might preserve cohesion. The American Third Army, crossing in sectors south of Montgomery's operation, employs Dukus with similar effectiveness. Patton's forces establish bridgeheads with the same industrial efficiency, the same relentless vehicle shuttle runs, the same tactical surprise against defenders expecting boats and bridges. By March 25th, all major Allied army groups have established positions east of the Rhine. The river, Germany's last significant natural barrier, has been crossed in force. German casualties during the crossing operations are lower than they might have been with conventional assault methods. The speed of the DUKW-enabled crossings left less time for effective defensive fire. But operational casualties mount rapidly as Allied forces exploit their beachheads. German units attempting to retreat are overtaken by mechanized columns. Artillery units lacking transport to displace lose their guns. Infantry formations fragment into disconnected groups that lose tactical coherence. The Ruhr pocket, already surrounded, becomes inescapable. Army Group B, Germany's largest remaining force in the west, is cut off from retreat routes. Over the following weeks, it will surrender piecemeal, yielding over 300,000 prisoners. Army Group H retreats northeast toward Hamburg and the Baltic coast, fighting delaying actions that accomplish nothing beyond postponing the inevitable. The political implications register in Berlin. With the Rhine crossed in force, the Western Allies can advance virtually unimpeded toward Germany's heartland. Any remaining hope for a separate peace with the West, always unrealistic, becomes impossible. The Third Reich will end in total defeat, probably within weeks rather than months. On the Rhine's eastern bank, Dukus continue their operations, now supplemented by pontoon bridges carrying heavier vehicles. The distinctive amphibious trucks have become commonplace sights, their revolutionary nature already fading into routine. Engineers service them, drivers operate them with practiced efficiency. Troops board them without particular notice. The weapon that Germany never anticipated has become simply another piece of equipment in the vast Allied logistical apparatus. By March 27th, for days after the initial crossing, Allied forces have pushed 40 kilometers beyond the Rhine in some sectors. The river that was supposed to halt the invasion has become a rear area, notable only for the engineering traffic maintaining the supply lines. The Rhine line has not just been broken, it has been rendered historically irrelevant with a speed that ancient military history provides no precedent for understanding. In the closing weeks of World War II in Europe, as Allied armies advance across Germany and Soviet forces close on Berlin, the DUKW fades from attention. The vehicles continue operating, hauling supplies, transporting personnel, performing the unglamorous logistics work for which they were originally designed. The dramatic role they played in crossing the Rhine becomes one detail among many in the larger narrative of Germany's defeat. Post-war analysis by military historians reveals what German commanders could not fully comprehend during the chaos of collapse. The DUKW represented a category of technological surprise that traditional military intelligence was not organized to detect or understand. It was not a wonder weapon in the conventional sense. Possessed no advanced armament. Its performance specifications, while adequate, were not exceptional. What made it revolutionary was its capability to bypass the conceptual boundary between land and water operations. German defensive doctrine for river barriers rested on assumptions that were entirely reasonable given 2,000 years of military history. Attackers must construct bridges or use boats. Both methods are time-consuming and vulnerable. Defenders with prepared positions and adequate artillery can inflict severe casualties on forces attempting to cross under fire. These assumptions had been validated in countless operations across centuries of warfare. The Rhine itself had halted or delayed multiple invasions based on precisely these tactical realities. The DUKW invalidated these assumptions not through superior performance but through a different operational concept. It was simultaneously a truck and a boat, requiring no transition between land and water transport. This eliminated the vulnerable pause, the stationary moment when forces are most exposed. Dukas entered the water, crossed, and immediately moved inland in one continuous operation. They established shuttle services that functioned with industrial rather than military rhythm, more reminiscent of factory production lines than traditional assault boats. German intelligence failure in this case was not a matter of incompetence but of conceptual limitation. Intelligence services were organized to detect threats defined by existing categories. New aircraft types, improved tanks, more powerful artillery. The DUKW fit no established category. It was a logistics vehicle that functioned as an assault weapon. It was produced in thousands but was not tracked as a major weapons system. Reports that mentioned it classified it as auxiliary equipment, notable but not strategically significant. This failure reflects a broader reality about technological surprise in warfare. The most disruptive innovations are often those that change the rules of engagement rather than simply improving performance within existing frameworks. The DUKW did not cross rivers faster than any other vehicle. It rendered the concept of crossing almost irrelevant by treating the river as merely another type of terrain. American industrial capacity enabled this innovation in ways that Germany's more artisanal approach to manufacturing could not have replicated. Over 21,000 Dukas were produced during the war years. They served in every theater, from Pacific atolls to European rivers to Asian rivers. Their reliability, while not perfect, was sufficient for sustained operations. When vehicles broke down, they could be replaced from inventory rather than requiring specialized repairs. This industrial approach to military equipment, producing capabilities in such volume that individual losses were tactically insignificant, represented a strategic advantage that transcended any particular weapon specifications. The Rhine crossing using Dukas demonstrated several principles that would become central to post-war military thinking. First, that mobility and surprise can compensate for defensive advantages. Second, that industrial capacity applied to military problems can produce decisive capabilities. Third, that conventional military wisdom, while valuable, must be constantly questioned against the possibility that adversaries might employ unexpected methods. For German commanders who survived the war, the Rhine crossing became a case study in professional military failure. Not failure of courage or tactical competence. Wehrmacht soldiers and officers generally performed their duties skillfully given available resources. Rather, failure of imagination and institutional flexibility. The German military in 1945 remained highly professional in many respects, but it had lost the adaptive capacity necessary to respond effectively to innovative threats. The DUKW itself continued in military service for decades after World War II. Improved versions participated in Korea, Vietnam, and various peacekeeping operations. Civilian versions became tourist attractions in several cities, offering amphibious tours. The design, fundamentally sound, proved adaptable to numerous applications. But its historical significance rests primarily on those March nights in 1945 when it transformed a supposedly impregnable barrier into a permeable obstacle. The Rhine today shows little evidence of the drama that unfolded along its banks 8 decades ago. The river flows as it has for millennia, carrying commercial traffic, defining boundaries, serving as a scenic backdrop to European cities. Historical markers at some crossing sites commemorate Operation Plunder and related operations. A few museums display preserved dukus, the vehicle's ungainly appearance no longer seeming revolutionary to generations accustomed to specialized equipment for every purpose. What remains instructive is the lesson embedded in the duku's role, that warfare evolves not only through increasingly powerful weapons, but through changed concepts of what is possible. The Rhine could not be held not because German defenders lacked courage or German commanders lacked skill, but because the nature of river warfare had fundamentally changed in ways that traditional military thinking had not anticipated. In the closing accounting of World War II's lessons, the DUKW stands as evidence that innovation often emerges from practical problem-solving rather than theoretical breakthrough. Engineers designing a vehicle to simplify beach logistics created, almost inadvertently, a weapon that helped collapse Germany's final defensive line. The gap between intention and consequence, between a supply truck and an assault weapon, measured not in technical specifications but in imaginative application, proved sufficient to change outcomes. The Third Reich fell for many reasons: numerical inferiority, strategic overextension, industrial inadequacy, ideological brutality that forfeited any possibility of support from conquered populations. But among the military factors contributing to the speed of final collapse, the Rhine crossing enabled by swimming trucks deserves recognition. It demonstrated that even in warfare's final stages, even when outcomes appear predetermined, the methods by which those outcomes are achieved matter significantly. German soldiers manning defensive positions in March 1945 were correct in one assessment. The Rhine represented a significant military obstacle. They were wrong in their assumption about how that obstacle would be overcome. The difference between correct assessment and wrong assumption proved decisive, measured in days rather than weeks, in thousands of casualties avoided rather than inflicted, in the accelerated conclusion of Europe's most destructive war. The matchstick models on a desk helped change naval aviation. Simple trucks that could swim helped collapse a river defense. Innovation in warfare, these cases suggest, often begins not with dramatic breakthrough but with someone asking whether the impossible might be merely difficult, and whether different thinking might achieve what conventional methods cannot.